Back with Steve Friend, FBI whistleblower, one of the stars of Police State, and author of True Blue. Steve, you're saying something interesting, which is that in the January 6 cases, the quarterbacking of these cases was entirely from Washington, D.C., from the central office. And so although you've got these regional offices that are opening files and opening cases, they're not, in fact, driving the investigation. Is that a departure from the norm? Normally, is it the case that if you open an FBI case in Denver, it's the Denver office that does the investigations, not necessarily DC? DC might help coordinate with Denver, but it's a Denver investigation. Was there a different approach taken in January 6th, and why do you think that is?
You've nailed it. That's actually specifically in the FBI's guidebook, the Domestic Investigations Operations Guide. And it specifies when an incident happens in a location, typically you open it up in that office and you investigate it. And if you need to do some sort of investigation elsewhere, you would do what's called cut a lead and ask for help, because it would make sense for me to fly from Florida to California to conduct an interview. An agent could do that for me. But the decision was made very early in the process to open up these cases separately for each person. And then wherever they lived, that office on paper would have responsibility. But Washington, D.C., there was a task force. They would essentially do a behind the scenes investigation and then give directives to the field. So if I open the case up in Florida, Washington would tell me how to run my own case. And that specifically is the departure from the rules. I should be able to call the shots on my own case and then proceed as I see fit. I'm a trained investigator. And the reason for that, when I asked, was they said from the headquarters very early on after January 6th that this was to get buy-in. Now, that could mean one of two things. One, you have a macabre view of your workforce and you don't think that they're going to do a good job unless their name is on it. Or two, this is going to allow the FBI to hit all of its quotas. And I said quotas because one does exist in the FBI for domestic terrorism, where the appetite for domestic terrorism from executives, from politicians, vastly outstrips supply in this country. So the FBI is always working from behind the curve, trying to generate cases.
I mean, see, this is a startling point, and you make it very vividly in the movie, that the demand for domestic terrorism on the part of the government and elites exceeds the supply. It's almost like they want more than they got. And so as a result, they've got to concoct some. They've got to produce more supply to meet the demand, so to speak. And they do this in all kinds of ways. How do they gin up these numbers? How do you make the numbers go up? Is it that you just find more defendants, people who, for example, did virtually nothing in January 6th, and you rope them in and start counting them as potential terrorists, even though it could be, some kid who was in there for 30 minutes, or a grandmother who walked in there, looked around and walked back out, and she too falls into the category because, hey, she was inside the Capitol, wasn't she? Is that how they kind of kick the numbers up?
Yes, it's a human nature. Work smarter and not harder. If I have separate from January 6th, let's say I have a domestic terrorist cell of 4 potential terrorists. Why open up one case with 4 bad guys when I can open up 4 cases with 1 bad guy and just duplicate my work? It's juking the stats here. And the FBI's own numbers belie what's actually going on. The FBI's last year's goal was to disrupt 600 terrorist operations. They only achieved 397. So if that's accurate, you would have to believe that every day of the year and twice on Sunday, the FBI stopped a domestic terrorist attack from occurring. I don't think you have to be too much of a critical thinker to look out your window and know that that is just plainly not accurate.
So you're describing something here that is very remarkable and perhaps goes all the way back to the aftermath of 9/11, which is that maybe right after 9/11, the FBI and also the other police agencies of government, there was the newly formed DHS, maybe expected that there would be a lot more terrorism and that they would need to be thwarting it left and right. Maybe it was that the U.S. military bombings of the Taliban and U.S. actions abroad disabled some of those groups like Al-Qaeda, at least in their ability to do harm here. And then the FBI goes, well, we're getting this giant river of cash to fight terrorism, we're not seeing a whole lot of terrorism. Do you think that that's maybe when all of this got started and now it's being just redeployed with a different target?
I think that that's when things got wrapped up into hyperdrive. I think 9/11 is really the catalyst because the military did a great job through counterinsurgency of combating those foreign actors. And the FBI really, as the national security arm, didn't have a whole lot to do. They were the sentry on the wall. And that's when mission creep happens. That's when the FBI started looking at homegrown violent extremists. And those were first generation Americans who might have sympathy for an al-Shabaab or an al-Qaeda. And then when they ran out of them, they adapted and evolved into domestic violent extremism. And most recently now we're seeing the agave, the anti-government, anti-authority violent extremist. And you have to look to what President Biden said a year ago at Independence Hall when he said that MAGA Republicans were anti-government and they were white supremacist. And interestingly, those are the two top priorities for the FBI's counterterrorism division.
We'll be right back with Steve Friend, FBI whistleblower. You can follow my next at Real Steve Friend, the book True Blue, My Journey from Beat Cop to Suspended FBI Whistleblower. If aches and pains are your problem, this right here, Relief Factor, is your remedy. Debbie and I started taking Relief Factor a couple of years ago, and what a huge difference we've seen in our joints. Nothing short of amazing. Aches and pains are totally gone thanks to this 100% drug-free solution called Relief Factor. How does it work? Relief Factor supports your body's fight against inflammation. That's the source of aches and pains. More than 1 million people have tried Relief Factor, and the vast majority, about 70%, have gone on to order more. Debbie's a true believer. She can now do the exercises that for a long time she wasn't able to do. So Relief Factor has been a big game changer for her, her aunt, other members of our family, Mike here in the studio, and for many other people. You too can benefit. Try it for yourself. Order the 3-week quick start for the discounted price of just $19.95. Go to relieffactor.com or call 800-4RELIEF to find out more about this offer. The number again to call, 800-4RELIEF, or go to relieffactor.com. Feel the difference.